sometime before when he was with the junior team or whatever
Yeah.
in Rimouski. And Gretzky came out and said the next big thing is
Yeah, Sidney
this
Crosby.
guy from Halifax. He didn't didn't say the Cole Harbour. He just
Yeah.
said from Halifax.
Well, he's got.
But Sidney Crosby. And then I said, "Wow, who's this guy?"
Yeah.
But he's got that sense. He's got that sense. He's got this thing where he's like the old when they tried having the puck highlighted on the screen.
Oh yeah.
He's got that in his head.
Yeah,
He knows where it is.
Yeah. Yeah, he's got great he's got great hockey sense. There's a lot of good players, but if you don't have that sense, there's a lot of good musicians out there, but there's just some of those guys that just got that touch.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? I mean,
Yeah.
I play with a lot of people that are touched.
Touched.
Oh, okay.
present company included. Oh yeah. All right. Hello world and welcome to the Wolfstead Today. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we are very, very happy to have Mr. Frank McKay in the studio. And for those of you who don't know, and I say you haven't been around the Maritimes, Frank has been in the music business. Well, he's one of the people from way back in the day that inspired me in my love for live music. How you doing today, sir?
I'm very good, Wayne. Nice to be here with you.
Yes, it's finally good to have you in the studio. I don't know how many times we've been in the same building, within 5 or 10 feet of each other, and haven't even got a chance to say
hello. That's right. Yeah.
But here we are today.
Absolutely.
And like I said, going way back, Frank, if we're going to go right back probably to the start, what would you say? Would you say that?
Well, I would go back to I started when I was around 1960.
Yeah.
And I was in junior high at the time.
And where was that?
And this was in Truro.
Yes.
And at Catholic school.
Oh.
And we used to play on the weekends, and stuff like that. And so the band was called the Corvettes. Of course, all the bands had car names.
Okay. Yeah.
So anyway, I graduated from junior high into grade 10. And my first week in grade 10, this guy come up to me in the hallway of the Truro Senior High School. And his name was Brian Chisholm. Now, Brian was a bass player.
Okay.
And he was a bass player with a new band they just were putting together called the Lincolns. And so Brian asked me, he said, listen, he says, we're putting this new band together. He said, just wondering, he said, if you'd like to come and try out for us, And so I said to him, I said, well, sure. I said, I'd love to, you know what I mean? Because a lot of these guys were like 2 or 3 years older than I was.
Yeah.
And they had been around for a while, and we all knew who they were, you know what I mean? So it was like, for me, it was real excitement, And so I said, so when do you want to get together and rehearse? You want to oh, never mind rehearsing, just show up at the IGA store, in the basement of the IGA store on this Friday night at 9 o'clock. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. So anyway, at 9 o'clock on that Friday, I was right in front of the bandstand, and they got me up, and we did a few numbers. Undoubtedly, because we never rehearsed, we undoubtedly did a number of songs over and over and over again, but it certainly didn't seem to bother the dancers any. And from that time on, the Friday night dances in Truro, right from that September of 1961, through to the finish in 1969. Friday nights were Lincoln nights in Truro.
Yeah. I've heard some stories.
Yeah.
And actually, I'm glad to say I've heard the story of you joining the band, and it matches.
Oh, is that right?
Sort of.
Yeah, sort of. But now another young blues player by the name of Charlie Acord often tells stories about he was too young. You guys used to play the Legion in Truro as well. Mm-hmm. And Charlie's father used to bring him down, and they would sit outside the Legion, and Charlie would listen to you guys inside. And then, now, I wasn't around for the Lincolns. I mean, I was around, but I wasn't listening to music let's say at that time. But later on, you were in several other of the major rock bands in Halifax. Now you were with the Lincolns for, like you said, 8 years.
Yeah, that's right, until September of '69.
And then
went with a band called Soma. Now Soma came from Bob Murphy. Bob Murphy was in Toronto during the heyday of the British invasion days.
Yes.
And they had a band called the Stitch in Time, which was a
that was-
glorified,
Yeah.
British cover band.
That was Bruce Wheaton. too,
Oh
wasn't it?
yeah, no. I mean, they were really, really popular
Yeah.
in Toronto. I mean, it was huge. You know what I mean for them. And for some reason, Bob wanted to put a new band together and try some original stuff. And so he came down to the Maritimes. And I remember Donnie Muir telling me that the first time Donnie was the keyboard player with the
Yeah.
Lincolns, and he was saying that he remembered the first time he saw Murph was standing in the audience and at the Legion Hall in Truro. And Donnie Morris was with him. Donnie was a bass player of Stitch in Time,
Yeah.
and Soma eventually. And so he said he remembered them standing there. He saw them, and then they come either at intermission or whatever, but they came backstage and then started to do the spiel about wanting to put a new band together. And so that's sort of how I got into Soma, was through this meeting of Bob Murphy and Donnie Morris coming to see the band. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And Soma was huge.
Very, very popular band. Very popular band. And the thing that was so great about Soma, and I always refer to with the Lincolns, we started in '61, went until '64. We took a year off, and what happened there is we were sort of more of a blues band, R&B-ish band, and the Beatles hit in '64, and although we tried to keep tried that style of music, just didn't work for us.
Yeah.
So we took a year off. I went to Ontario for a year, and then came back. And by that time, music had changed enough so that now R&B was really coming to the forefront.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, and it didn't hurt back in those days when you had people like Dutchie coming on the scene and a very young Teresa Malafont back in the day.
Well, I'll tell you one thing, Wayne. That's always been a big thrill of mine, was that by 1981, this is when Dutchie was really, really popular. Had the album Special Brew, and he was living in Montreal at the time, but he got sick.
Yeah.
And so all the rest of the boys came home, and he stayed in Montreal. And Gary Blair, who was the drummer there, extraordinary drummer, shuffled to die for. And but Gary called me. I was on a break from theater shows that I was doing, and he called me. He said, "Look," he said, "we got a chance," he said, "to do the band." He said, "without Dutch, because Dutch is still in Montreal." He said, "We got a chance to do a week at Zapatas." He said, "Would you front for us for the week? Would you join us for that?" And I said, "Just love to." And I'm telling you, by the end of that week, I was just in heaven. I mean, to get to play with Gary Blair and do some of those shuffles for a week, it was just crazy. And of course, he had the best blues band that I've ever heard in my life at that particular time. There was Donnie Muir on keys, John Lee on keys, Fish Fancy, who's just pocket. And when you want to drop a blues into a pocket, give it to Fish Fancy,
Yeah,
you know
give it
what I
to
mean?
Fish, yeah.
And Wade, who was just one of my favorite players of all time, and Gary and Ricky, the harp, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful band. And that week for me is always, anytime somebody brings up Dutchie's name, it always brings me back to that one week that I got to sing with his band.
Nice.
Because it was so such a treat to do so. You know what I mean? They were just at that time, they were the best blues band I had ever heard in my life. Yeah.
So now, even though you've played with blues bands and you've played with rock bands, you're kind of like our buddy Gordy. You're more of a rhythm and blues and a soul kind of guy, aren't you?
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, for sure. I mean,
You can really. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying anything bad about any of your singing, but when you're singing rhythm and blues, you can hear the joy in your voice. Like you're in the pocket. Then you're where you need to be.
Yeah, I think. Well, I mean, that's where I come from. You know what I mean? It's like back when I first joined the Lincolns in '61. They had a guitar player named Frank Mumford, and Frank was the glue to that band. I always referred to Frank as the glue in the Lincolns. But Frank would call me and he said, "Why don't you come out to the house?" He said, and he was just a kid himself at that time. He said, "I want you to hear some stuff." So, like at that particular time, 1961, I was into buying 45s.
Yes.
You know what I mean? The hit, whatever the hit was, you bought the 45 and you learned it off the 45 and all that stuff. Well, when I got out to Frank's, here he had all these albums. And he was listening to albums. He was listening to Ray Charles and live at Newport and live in Atlanta and other stuff. And the thing is with Ray in those days, he had found a groove where he was mixing gospel with R&B and blues and jazz and all that stuff. It was all rolled into one. And he had the Raylettes, who were his background singers, Bee Gees singers. And they always shouted gospel answers to everything he was doing, you know what I mean? And when I heard that stuff, it was just like mind-blowing for me, because I never, you know what I mean? I like I say, I used to listen to 45s, whatever the hit record was. That's what you learned it from. But listening to those things, you understand where it's a lot broader.
Okay, so that kind of
Stop.
that.
Oh, apparently.
No, like you said to tell him, you said to get out of here. I don't want that thing up there. Get out of here.
Yeah, but you see, that's in the way of the camera.
Is it? Well, here, let's put it here. Let's do this. Oh, you can't because that's a mic. All right, can we do that? Because no, that's not going to work either. I'll hold the damn thing and keep it out of your face. Here, look.
Oh, there. We lost Frank. There he is.
Yeah, and I lost my brain, my thought there. See what you did to me?
Yeah, well, was pretty close to falling off the edge.
Yeah.
Before you.
Yeah.
We have this relationship.
Yeah, bad.
but bad is good.
Yeah, but bad is good.
That's right, man. That is good. Yeah.
Okay, so we're back. So, Frank, you've been around for a long time. There's got to be a couple of really standout, events for you that have taken place over the years. Things that like maybe funny, maybe not, whatever, but just certain things that must stand out as fun, or as just little clips that stick out.
Well, I'll tell you one thing, a story about the Lincolns and where I finally understood how popular the band was. Like I say, we got back together in 1965.
Yes.
At the Legion. We had switched. We were playing at the IGA in the basement of the IGA store, and that was a lot of fun. But then we moved to the Legion. Now the Legion would hold 400 people, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, give or take. Yep.
Give or take. And if you got 500 in there, boy, you're packed. Well, it was not unusual for the Lincolns to have 1,000, 1,100 people in there on a Friday night. So it was just insanity.
1,000 people in the Churl Legion.
Yeah.
Holy cow! Can you say sardines, boys and girls?
Whoa, you know what I mean.
It's a good thing the stage is up off the floor.
Well, it is. It is. You know what I mean. So it was great. But so anyway, we started to play there in late '65. So through the next year and a half or so, we were going out. We would always play Truro on the Friday night, and then we'd go out, say, to Sydney Academy or go down to Dalhousie or to the high school in Dartmouth, Dartine. You know what I mean, and all these places. And that's basically where our might go to Moncton every once in a while to play, but. And then we got a call to go up to St. John, New Brunswick. Never had been there before. And it was for their winter carnival, UNB's winter carnival. So the headliner of that carnival was, in those days, was a band called Little Anthony and the Imperials. Now, they were a singing group. Wonderful. They had 2 or 3 hits, and were still very, very popular by the 67 or 60, 67, I guess, would be when we were there. So we went up to play at 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon on a Saturday afternoon. and to play this Barrack Green Armories. It's a huge building. So we get up there, and the place is jam-packed. It's just full. There must be 3,000, 3,500 people in there. And so anyway, we're there, and we've got this 4 or 5 o'clock, whatever it is, in the afternoon gig to do. So we do our thing, and then I was saying to the guys after it was over, and it was wonderful. I mean, it was a tremendous afternoon, you know. But when it was over, I was thinking to myself, well, geez, I'd like to stick around a while and catch Little Anthony and the Imperials. And so I was talking to somebody, and they said, no, Little Anthony and the Imperials not until tomorrow night. So all these people were there to see the Lincolns.
Wow.
So that's when it hit me that, oh, okay,
Yeah.
there's a bit more to this than what I've been giving it credit for. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that was the moment.
Yeah,
wasn't it?
exactly. Yeah, you know, it's insofar as the Lincoln's popularity went.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, come on, you had a radio DJ that was pumping you all the time. Hey, Gordy, you never had that for you, did you, buddy?
Never had it.
Yeah.
Oh, my.
So there's those, you know, and then a lot of the times when I was with Soma, a lot of the gigs that we got to play, different things, like we played with Chicago at the O'Keefe Center in Toronto. Wow. Wonderful gig, played with Sly and the Family Stone in Montreal. And the thing was that in Montreal, when we were playing with Sly, we were living in Montreal at the time, and we're under contract with Aquarius Records, and we had Train out, and they were playing Train a lot in Montreal, so everybody knew who we were in Montreal. So a lot of the times when you play with an established band, a lot of the times it can be just waiting for your act to get over so they can see the headliner. You know what I mean? But they knew who we were, and so therefore they stayed with us the whole time through. So it was like gigs like that, and there must have been 18, 20,000 people in the old Forum in Montreal. You know what I mean? That stuff, Jay Giles, we got to play with Santana. So lots of things with Soma that were really, really, special. You know what I mean?
Well, I know from the other side of the stage, from looking up at it, it was special as well. And now, so you did a lot of theater.
Yeah. And
you moved out west for a while, and you were doing it out there.
Yeah.
And I would imagine that if the opportunity for the gig came up again, that we'd probably have to hold you down, would we?
Well, the only thing is that as you get older, you know what I mean. Everything is changing. Yes. Everything is changing, and it was like when I first came on the scene in the late '50s. I was so into rock and roll, you couldn't get me to listen to anything else.
Yes.
You can see all that happening again.
Yeah.
It's like, whether it's rap, whether it's, whatever you want to call it, it's a totally different change, and you can see things changing as it goes,
We see a lot of music being produced today that's, some would say, is not music because it's not being created by musical instruments. It's being created by sounds and synthesizers and stuff like that. Our parents hated rock and roll. It was the devil's music.
Mm-hmm.
If it wasn't gospel, it wasn't worth having. And they hated long hair. Today we don't understand piercings and tattoos and techno music and rap. But it's what each generation does. The great thing about it is that our music has been preserved. And even though things are changing, we still have the option to play what we want to play.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So now you've got a CD coming out.
Yeah. I got a CD. Hopefully it'll be arriving for Valentine's Day, and it's we've gone back and looked at 10 or 11 tunes from the sessions that Ross and I have done.
Yes.
And we've updated them, and Ross has just producer extraordinaire, Ross
Yeah,
Billard,
Ross
I'm
Billard,
talking.
yeah, okay.
And, so like I was saying on the way out here, I was down to Ross's this afternoon. We were doing some final editing and stuff like that on it. And but hopefully that's going to be ready Valentine's Day. And a lot of, my favorite R&B songs are on there. And so we hope everybody's going to enjoy it, yeah.
Well, I can't see them not enjoying it. How can you not? I mean, they've been listening to them for years, and those are the tunes that they've told you that they want to hear. I often wonder, when you're a singer or a performer, and there's certain songs that get associated with you, and that kind of stick with you.
Mm-hmm.
Does it ever get tiresome to play those songs?
Well, I mean, if you're I'm sure there were times that back when we were all working until 3 o'clock in the morning that you got one more set to do at 2:15 in the morning, and so what are you looking for to fill that last set and stuff like that. So I'm sure it happens to everybody, but in a lot of cases, I mean, certain songs stay with you. I have no idea why. In the midst of all this R&B and rock and roll and stuff like that I've been associated with, why a song like Danny Boy stayed with me. I remember growing up in the Red Row in Stellarton. My father was a miner there, and we lived in the Red Row, which was a row of company houses. And he would have this fella come in. And when they would have parties, kitchen table parties and stuff like that, and this guy would come in and he always sang Danny Boy, and I think that even as a child, listening to this guy sing it, it stayed with me, and I must have liked the tune, and then I just started to sing it, and it just stayed with me, and it's on this compilation that we have coming out.
Well, I guess everybody's got something that that somebody else reminds them. I mean, Soma, you think of Soma, you think of Train.
Yeah, absolutely.
Pepper Tree, you think of Airplane.
Absolutely.
I mean, so there's certain bands that that left certain songs with you.
Yeah.
But any regrets?
Not really. I got very lucky in that I had that secondary career of music theater opened itself to me, and so I went in that direction, and it's very interesting that when I was finished with Soma, from a musical standpoint,
yes,
there was a certain level that we had achieved. And I always like to refer to Soma as first of all, we were 61 to 64 with the Lincolns. I call that junior high school.
Okay.
Went from 65 to 69 with the Lincolns in Truro, the second trip around with them at the Legion. I call that high school. And then when I joined Soma, that was going to college, that was learning. What I mean? That was learning and getting the chance to, because up until that time. When the Lincolns were finished, we were just a cover band. That's what we were, a glorified cover band.
Yeah. And
then when we went with Soma, it was all brand new material, and so therefore you were learning. You know what I mean? So I always look at that as junior high, high school, and college.
And college.
Yeah.
Well, I think you got your degree.
Thank you, man. Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I think you graduated on the dean's list, to tell you the truth there, buddy. So now, if people wanted to get in touch with you, Frank, how could they do that?
Well, I'm very active on Facebook.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Do you do the other Instagram and
no,
Twitter?
I'm basically a Facebook guy.
Good,
you know what
man.
I mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, we just did a thing last year. I know you guys were there.
Yeah.
For a friend of ours who was who we were having a benefit for, and everything was promoted through Facebook.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we ended up selling out the venue, and it was a great success. So
Yeah.
I mean, Facebook, for all the negatives that it's taking over the last say a year and a half or so, you know, it still basically is one-on-one, letting
Yes.
people know.
Well,
you know.
it's I mean that's how we promote our shows. I don't do Instagram or Twitter or any of that stuff. Tumblr. I don't even know anything about any of that stuff, and I don't care to really, to be honest with you. Facebook works for me, and it works for both of our sites now. Jim is a little bit more active. Gordy, I don't know how Gordy are you?
Facebook.
Yeah, Gordy's a Facebook kind of guy. You
You
know,
know, podcast.
yeah, and then we have our podcast
Oh, yeah,
as
okay,
well, right?
yeah,
So,
yeah.
but most of the technical stuff I leave to Jim, because if it was left up to me, we'd be still on episode 1, season 1, and that was 4 years ago. But and now, when can we expect this new CD? You say by Valentine's.
By
Day.
Valentine's Day, yeah.
All right, so we're getting real close.
Yeah, yeah. So, so it'll be another month, less than a month away, yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, really looking forward to it, and I hope people, will get you a copy of it and
Perfect.
maybe play a couple tunes off it or something for us, and we'll see what happens.
Now, I'd just like to put a little bug in your ear. CIOE does have a room that seats just about 100 people, and we have a stage, and we're all ready, and we like to do CD release parties. So
Oh.
if it's something that you'd like to think about, you can talk to us at CIOE, because we are the home of East Coast music,
Fantastic.
and we would be
Yeah.
glad to talk to you about that.
All right, let's have a chat.
Stop.
Because if I wouldn't have lost 40 pounds, I wouldn't have got in the chair the last time
It
I
really
was
should
there.
be.
You're the bartender for Christ's sake.
That's what I'm talking about.
It should be treated like a soft seater. You know, no dancing.
Yeah, well, that's what it is.
just-
What I like about it
That
is,
way the music gets heard.
what I like about it is it's taken on the atmosphere, and I want them to really start to promote it when the show gets to beginning. It's very, very much becoming like the Carlton. It's a quiet room, okay? And I love the Carlton, buddy. I'll tell you right now, I bow down to them guys because they got it right. You go in there to pay $20 or $25 to hear a show, you're gonna hear the friggin' show. Because you start talking, somebody's coming over and telling you to
Good
shut
stuff,
up.
good stuff, yeah.
And I didn't think that they'd do it. And we went to see Hal Bruce and Lisa Richard. And there was a table of women and guys over here, and the women in that were cackling and laughing and everything. And the bartender went over, the waiter went over and told them, "We're out the door."
Yeah, good for them. Good for them.
Yeah.
But there was
Yeah.
a big fight, and
Knock down, drag
The
'em out.
girl
yeah.
won, and
the men got into it about 15 minutes in after the women were through with the bartender.
okay. So what's your time at now, there, Smedley?
Smedley says it's 32 minutes.
That's perfect.
That's enough?
That's enough, I think. Yeah.
Oh
we'll
my
go with
God,
it.
he's got so many stories to tell. What about that night in Charlotte?
Which one?
Somebody wrote a song.
The 3
Leaving
days you-
Charlottetown. That was JP. He must have been with you.
3 days you were trapped during Hurricane Juan with that squirrel.
That's where all his hair went. The squirrel.
The squirrel's
was
still
cold.
talking about
The
it.
squirrel was cold.
Well, the thing is about that, I was away doing a show in Orangeville, Ontario. And I flew in the day after Hurricane Juan went through. And it was hard to believe. It didn't affect Ontario. It was just came right through the downtown Halifax. Right
Oh,
through
gee, hit Lower Sackville too, baby,
Did
with
it?
a
Yeah,
punch.
yeah,
Oh, yeah,
yeah.
I had 2 black eyes from it. Oh,
Wow,
Yeah,
wow.
No, it wasn't good. Our neighborhood took a bad hit.